Please be seated. Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. And I say that because I need my spiritual community, my community who I know loves humankind, to be around me, especially this week. It's been a pretty tough week. There has been some horrific things that have happened in this week. As a country, we continue to struggle with gun violence. Innocent people have been killed. And we struggle also with our sense of power in this world, in our nation, and how we police each other. And I am glad to be here today, and I am glad that I am able to sit and hear these lessons, because I believe they are filled with much wisdom. But as it says in them, not worldly wisdom, but godly wisdom. And isn't it a shame that worldly wisdom and godly wisdom isn't the same? Wasn't wisdom there while God was creating, through Jesus, everything? But we are so human and we get it so wrong often. So there's a few things I want to say about the Beatitudes, which they've been preached a lot. They come up in Luke, they come up in Matthew. But the way that I find helpful is a commentary suggests that we don't use the translation happy, but blessed. The opposite of happy is sad, but the opposite of blessed is cursed. And I think if we really think about it, when we say, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, we might also agree cursed are the haughty and the conceited, and those who think they know everything and have all the answers, because that is an awfully difficult way to live in this world, thinking you know it all and it's up to you to tell everybody else. That, to me, would be a curse. But this poor in spirit, is humility, vulnerability. It is the opposite of conceit and haughtiness. And we hear in the scriptures today, and there was no guile. Now, I know that wit at a dinner party can be great, but wit and guile are different. And remember in that gospel where Jesus meets Nathanael for the first time, Jesus says, "Now here is someone with no guile." Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Wouldn't it be a curse to live in a world in which you could show no emotion, no sadness, no anger. Now, I am not advocating for living in anger, but there is such a thing as paying attention to when you are indignant about something. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. That is comforting to me. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, this word meek really tripped up our Bible study. I shouldn't say tripped up. I have to give our Bible study way more credit than that, but it's interesting, meekness. And so I went and I looked for an antonym for weakness, and it says triumph, triumphant. And so we need to be careful, because in our world today we see meekness as sort of a doormat where you're walking over people. But that is not the definition that Jesus is using here. What it is here instead is a total lack of pride. It is a lack of pride. In all the readings we heard today, there is one message that gets its way through everything pretty clearly. And this is something that I preach all the time. And that is, folks, pay attention. God is in charge and we are not. So when we say meek, it is the same as the fear, one of the other readings. Fear isn't about, well, let me tell you what fear is about in this. It is about being awed by God. It is about standing and looking, metaphorically, of course, but you could just look at the whole world and you'd get it. It is about standing and understanding how small each one of us are relative to our Creator. Our Creator is huge, unknowable, but only in pieces. We can say something about God. Many of us have experiences of God. But none of us know God in God's totality. We get beautiful glimpses. That should keep us pretty meek. Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." And then we have, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Righteousness is being right with God, being aligned with God. In our tradition, it is the Judeo-Christian tradition. It means following the laws, following the commandments, following the way of Jesus. And when Jesus came, Jesus wasn't so concerned with the letters of the law, but was desperately concerned with the Spirit. And just as some of our mainline traditions will tell us exactly what to do, as Episcopalians, we need to figure it out ourselves. Our church says study it, know it, experience it, and come back and tell us what that's like, because we will grow deeper spiritually by all of our experience, because God is that big. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Shortcut: don't judge other people, and they won't judge you. Pretty simple. It's so hard to do, especially when you're like me. I have an opinion about everything. But I have to remember it's an opinion, not necessarily truth. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And you heard the rest. So in commentary I was reading to work on this, there was a difference between, well, in English, and we're full of school teachers, you know this better than me, difference between the indicative and the imperative, right? Indicative is a statement or question. Imperative is a directive and a command. This particular commentary said that we should read these as statements, but we should live them as imperatives. And also, this commentary, and I'm just telling you the parts that that helped me, resonated with me. It said that these sayings were not necessarily for pointing your finger at everybody else that is an outsider, but these are statements that should be obvious in the Christian community. Did you hear that? Do you see these? Do you see people who are open and vulnerable, who are not haughty? Many of you know I love C.S. Lewis, and the one thing that he picks at constantly are people who are spiritually haughty. So I think some of us here ought to be careful of that. Which I want to go and talk a little bit now, holding that. Oh, one other thing. Jesus didn't just make these up. These are part of the Jewish tradition, and as a matter of fact, it's also part of the wisdom literature of the pagans, of the religion of the Roman Empire at that time. But I wonder if Jesus' take on them is a little different. And I would think so. And Paul talked about that in his letter. So, Tyran Nichols, Did I say it right? Tell me how to say it. Tyree Nichols. I'm assuming at this point everybody has heard of Tyree Nichols. And I bet you a lot of you really would like me to leave this subject alone. But how can we? How can we? When I was thinking about him, I was thinking about what made him different, what got him in trouble. Now, first of all, I have heard over and over and over again from some of my black friends that they all do a talk with their kids, especially their boys, and say you have to be really careful because these things happen. When researching a while ago, Emmett Till's mother gave him that lecture. And I'll bet Tyree Nichols' mother also gave him that lecture. One of the things that they said about him was that he was a free spirit. Did you all hear that? Can you read that? And that it was a skateboarder. That struck me, that skateboarding piece. And you know, it's funny because my oldest daughter, Jacqueline, had a skateboarding friend. And you know, there's a certain attitude among teachers and adults and parents about skateboarders. And some of you are like, yeah. And you wonder why. So I looked up, what is skateboarding culture? And listen to this, it's off the web. Skateboard culture values individuality, creativity, and freedom. Can you see why Tyree Nichols might have gotten in trouble? How dare him think he had freedom? Skaters are known for their unrelenting dedication to progressing the sport holistically. And by the way, it is a sport, and it is in the Olympics as of 2020. The community is built, this is what I love. The community is built on mutual respect. Instead of one-upping each other, skaters often encourage their peers and embrace their differences. So when I think of Tyree Nichols and I think of him having some of these characteristics, it also makes me think of the Beatitudes, where Jesus is teaching to huge crowds. And basically what he's saying to them is a reversal of what is commonly understood in that time society. Everyone thought that God's favor was on rich people. People thought that God's favor was on healthy people because you were getting punished if you were sick. Able-bodied people because you were being punished if you were not. But Jesus comes along and says, not so fast. We need to change this perspective. And the people around him, both the Romans and the religious elite, didn't like it so much. This isn't a reversal of power. This is an evening out of power. This is giving everyone voice, everyone power, everyone a chance for opportunities to succeed, to find meaning, to be a whole person. Maybe that's why we didn't like the skateboarding culture at first, because we were used to signing up our children for soccer or for football or for baseball, in which adults were in charge and there were rules you absolutely had to follow. Now, I don't know about you all. I think this is kind of unusual, but all three of my kids were not into sport. But they were into things like theater, where there's room, where breaking the rules to some extent made it more interesting and successful, but you had to know the rules before you could break them. And it just said the skateboarding culture is a culture where kids aren't following rules. These kids were making it up as they go along. And what is it about that that is so dangerous for those who are in power? I'll bet many of us here have children, grandchildren, or were children who loved sport and loved the rules and wanted to follow them. But I bet there's people here also, and I know this because I know some of you, and I know this to be true for me, and that is you just didn't get that kid. You got the child who beats to a different drum. You got the child who wants to look beyond and see something, and perhaps it is see something more equitable, more meaningful for everyone, instead of following the rules. And just as Jesus said, he didn't come to demolish the law, but I do believe he came to reinterpret it. And one of the major ways reinterpreting the law that really brings more justice is interpreting the law for everyone. That is a whole new conversation, is it not? See how this is kind of weaving into that Martin Luther King ideas? Folks, this is the Christian edict. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Micah's beautiful, beautiful reading today. First of all, what it says is that God is all powerful, and make no mistake about that. And then it says, remember Moses. And the whole point is that Moses freed them from oppression. And if we are living the law of Moses, we too should be looking for places to free people from oppression. And in that, I'm going to end with this because it's so beautiful. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God.